something on beloved Sesame Street, where Ernie is very much enamored of his rubber ducky. He has a song called Rubber Ducky, You're the One. You make bath time lots of fun, Rubber Ducky, I'm awfully fond of you. He really loves his rubber ducky, but he wants to play the saxophone. And when he's got the duck in his hand and he's got the saxophone there, you can't manage it. And a character called Hootie the Owl, who's really a very hip character, says, you got to put down the ducky, you got to put down the ducky, you got to put down the ducky if you want to play the saxophone. What a great lesson in life. There are things we have to put down if we want to do something else. And it reminds me also of the Three Stooges. Years ago, many years ago, when I was a kid, I'd watch Three Stooges, and there's a scene where the Three Stooges are in bed together. They're sleeping, they're snoring, they're on their backs, they're sleeping there with their pajamas. Then the alarm clock goes off. They all wake up. Then they take off their pajamas, and under their pajamas are their street clothes. Well, it doesn't work that way, does it? You got to take off your street clothes to put on the pajamas. You got to put down the ducky if you want to play the saxophone. Sometimes you just got to put something off in order to put something else on. And this is a lesson that the Apostle Paul teaches in at least 4 of his letters, in Ephesians, in Galatians, in Colossians, in Romans. It's a very important aspect of his spirituality, and it should be a very important aspect of our spirituality too, that we have to put certain things off, take certain things off in order to put something else on. It's kind of like going into a clothing store. Here's a guy who goes into a clothing store and he's looking to buy a new blazer. So he goes into the changing room and he comes out and he's wearing the blazer over his jacket that he wore when he came in. Well, you can see how this blazer is fitting here over his jacket. And again, it doesn't work that way, does it? In his letters, the Apostle Paul repeatedly makes this point, the necessity of exchanging the new for the old. You got to take something off in order to put something on. And otherwise, things don't fit right. They don't look right. It doesn't work. We touched on this last week when we were talking from Colossians. We majored mostly in what you have to put on. We mentioned 5 things that Colossians says we need to put on, character qualities like patience and kindness. But this week we're going to concentrate on the other half of the equation, though. What do we have to take off in order to put something else on? And what's the connection between taking certain things off and putting certain things on? Often, and I think you'll agree with me on this, often people put on new behavioral garments without taking off their old habits of life, their old ways of looking at things, their old ways of behaving. They put on their pajamas over their street clothes. They don't put down the ducky when they want to play the saxophone. They go into the changing room, but keep wearing what they were wearing when they came in. And how does that come across? When we do that, the garments of the Spirit that he provides us, they just don't fit right. We don't come across as authentic because underneath, we're still operating on the old systems of our BC identity, if I can put it that way. What Paul calls the flesh. We're still operating the same old way underneath, and we've just attached certain religious behaviors on the outside. How does it look and feel? Many believers in subcultures will pride themselves on championing certain causes. That's what's happening a lot in our day. If you want to be a really good believer, you have to feel this way about, let's be honest, you have to feel this way about immigration. You have to feel this way about sexuality. You have to feel this way about abortion. And if you hit these hot button issues, abortion, sexuality, etc., then you're a good believer. Being a good believer is being measured by the causes that we champion instead of the qualities that we exhibit. And when the qualities that we exhibit are not really qualities that resemble the Messiah, when the qualities we exhibit are tawdry, are trashy, are nasty, then no matter what causes we attach on the outside, it doesn't ring true, not at all. When we do not pay careful attention to putting off the works of the flesh, our new garments, our new behaviors, like camouflage, they fail to impress because the inappropriate characteristics of the old nature are peeking through and causing the new outer garments to be a bad fit. How many famous or high-profile believers can you name? And I'll bet if we were meeting in our congregational meeting place now, I'd ask for a show of hands. How many people, famous believers, high-profile Yeshua believers, have been denounced as phonies, and rightly so? Being a phony is pretending to be something on the outside that you aren't on the inside. It's putting your pajamas on over your street clothes. It's trying to play the saxophone without putting down the donkey. So what exactly is it that we need to take off? Basically, it's everything that belongs to our sinful ways of thinking, of feeling, and of living. Paul hits this hard when he writes to the Ephesians. And I'm going to be focusing on Ephesians today because last week was Colossians. This week, let's do Ephesians. I'm going to get something out of my way here. There we are. Paul says this in the 4th chapter of Ephesians. So I tell you this. Indeed, I insist on this in the Lord, that we no longer walk as, I'm sorry, let's get that back. Come on, baby, treat me nice. Indeed, I insist on it. Walk no longer as the pagans do, stumbling around in the futility of their thinking. He hits it hard here. Listen to what he says. They are darkened in their understanding. They are alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance in them due to their hardness of heart. Since they are past feeling, they've grown calloused. Other translations will say, people get calluses in their hearts. And you've probably known people with callous hearts. They have turned themselves over to indecency for the practice of every kind of immorality with greed for more. Well, that's really heavy hitting. Every kind of immorality, decency, of course, it invokes sexuality in our minds, but that's not the only kind of tawdry garments that we ought to take off. Paul continues, says, however, you did not learn the Messiah in this way. If indeed you have heard him and were taught in him, as the truth is in Yeshua, this is not what being a believer is about. It's not about holding on to the ways we used to behave while tagging on religious behaviors and labels. He says, verse 22, with respect to your former lifestyle, you ought, here he goes now, lay aside the old self, corrupted by its deceitful desires. You got to put down the donkey. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put something else on now, and put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. That's a big statement. We are created in Yeshua by the Spirit. We are recreated, you could say, to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. We have not been brought to faith in order that we might continue our old style of thinking and acting and behaving, their attitudes, and just tack on religious behaviors and religious causes. Oh, no. We've been created to be like God, true righteousness. So it's a big thing with Paul. It's not just in Ephesians, remember? Colossians 2, Galatians 2, and also in Romans. So I'm going to look at 5 things he says in Ephesians that we need to put off in order to put something else on. There is a symbiotic relationship between putting off and putting on. You can't really put on the garment unless you take off the other garments you were wearing. You need to take this off in order to put this on. And he hammers it home 5 times. First, he says, take off lying to put on truth. He says, lay aside lying, and each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Lying is probably the most common sin in the world. Lying, I know I sound negative here, but lying comes naturally to people. We bend the truth, we hide the truth, we distort the truth, we misrepresent the truth because it tends to protect us from certain things and it tends to advance our agenda. Paul says, take off lying and put on truth. Lay aside lying. Each one of you speak truth to his neighbor. We should be characterized as being truth tellers. That people who know us say, Roberta, she always tells you the truth. Nancy, you can trust what she says. We got to be like that. So we're members of one another. Now, this membership with one another, I'm going to give you 2 spheres for that. First of all, in our faith family, we are members of one another. We are part of the body of Messiah. We are members of one another. That's true. But there's also a commonality we share with other human beings. I saw about one of the relatives of a man that was killed in the massacre in Australia recently. And he came to visit Ahmed al-Ahmed, who was the man who tackled one of the people with a rifle, one of the killers. And he's in the hospital recovering from his wounds. And this man who came wearing a kippah, he's an Orthodox Jew, and he was standing there saying, and here he is, an Orthodox Jew, having this conversation with a Muslim. And he says to the Muslim, he thanks him for saving Jewish people, although his own brother-in-law was killed. He thanks him, and he says, we really are all one family, regardless of what our faith is. We're part of the human family. This is true. And we should not lie to one another. We should not lie to one another in the Messianic family of faith. We should not lie to one another in the Jewish family. We should not lie to one another in the human family. We should not be characterized as liars. This is why Peter will say, live such good lives among the Gentiles, that they may see your good works and glorify God on the day that he visits us. We should live in such a way that people who are not believers are impressed. In the first centuries, that was true. That's what caused Yeshua faith to turn the world upside down. It was not so much the preaching, it was the living. The living was the greatest credential. So we should take off lying and put on truth. Number 2, take off brooding anger to put on forgiveness and relationship. Be angry, yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, nor give the devil a foothold. We're all going to get angry. Being angry is normal. It's a normal physiological reaction. And you're going to get angry. But don't sin. Don't brood on the anger. Don't nurse the anger. Don't nurse a grudge. Don't sleep on it and just carry it on. When I was a teenager, I worked for a band leader the drummer was a friend of mine. He told me that our band leader had not spoken to his brother in 30 years. That's not good. As much as Paul says elsewhere, as much as is in you, live at peace with all men. And all men, all women, all people. And don't nurse grudges. That's take off your grudges and don't give the devil a foothold and put on forgiveness and peace. 3, take off stealing and put on productive living. The one who steals must steal no longer. Instead, he must work, doing something useful with his own hands, so he may have something to share with the one who has need. We should be people who are characterized as hard workers. At our job, wherever we work, we should have a job if we can at all manage to find one. Whatever our job is, we should be known as hard workers. I was privileged to go to India quite a few years ago, and I remember seeing a man digging a hole in the hot Indian sun. He was digging a hole, and you could tell the attitudes in the caste society in India that whatever it is in life that you're given to do, that's your place in life, and that's where you have to make it work. So this man was digging a hole. Came back later on, he's still digging a hole. It never occurred to him to say, I deserve better than this. No, he realized this is my lot in life. This is how I put food on the table. This is how I keep my family from starving. I am digging a hole. And whatever you do, whether you're working in an operating room in a hospital or in a 7-Eleven down the street, whatever it is, work as unto the Lord, work productively. That's what we should characterize us. Not trying to find some scam or some angle or some way in which we can gain illicit benefit. Don't steal. Work and be known as a good worker. Number 4, take off trash talk and put on spirit-empowered communication. Let no harmful word come out of your mouth, but only what is beneficial for building others up according to the need, so that it gives grace to those who hear. Don't be a negative, nasty person. You know, we all have to fight against that. Only speak words that are beneficial for building other people up. Don't be negative. Don't be Debbie Downer. Don't be a Debbie Downer. Don't be a negative influence. I have to fight to do that. You have to fight to do that. Putting on these clothes takes quite a bit of effort. It's not automatic. It's not something that the Spirit does for us. The Spirit provides the clothes, but we need to pick them up and put them on. And we need to take off trash talk and put on Spirit-empowered, loving, true, helpful communication. And finally, number 5, take off trash talk to put on Spirit-empowered communication. Let no harm, let's see, no, that's 4, sorry. Number 5, take off conflict to put on kindness and compassion. Get rid of, no, this look at the 6 things that are mentioned here. This is an indictment of all of us, and it's really a game plan for us this week, next week, and every week that follows. Get rid of all 6 things, all bitterness and rage and anger and quarreling and slander, along with all malice. I gotta read that again. Along with all malice. It doesn't matter if you're championing great causes, standing with this group or that group, standing for this or standing for that. If you're a person who's full of bitterness and rage and anger and quarreling and slander and malice, it doesn't ring true. It doesn't glorify God. This is not the image of the living God. This does not advance the kingdom of God. You might be a sincere person, but you've got to put down the ducky if you've got to play the saxophone. You've got to take off the the street clothes when you put on the pajamas. You've got to take off your street clothes when you go in to the changing room, because you're not really going to change at all until you take off what needs to be taken off. Instead, be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving each other as God and Messiah also forgave you. I'm quite fixated on this issue that's come out of Scripture and that I've seen so strongly in the last couple of weeks, because as I see the reputation of those of us who are believers in Yeshua, when we're generally regarded as somewhat angry people in some circles, and in some circles, the label is deserved. If we're perceived to be angry or bitter or judgmental, slanderous, there's no benefit for that. I want to finish with something Paul says in Romans, where he says this again in another way. He says, the night is almost gone and the day is near. That is the time of the coming of Yeshua. So let us put off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the day, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual promiscuity and sensuality. Those are the sexual sins. Not in strife and envy. Those are the attitudinal, behavioral, relational sins. Instead, put on the Lord Messiah Yeshua and stop making provision for the flesh for its cravings. In other words, don't think that you can keep on these old garments of your style of relating from your BC life, that you can keep them on. Maybe it makes you feel warm. Maybe it's not so bad. Just keep them. You can keep them underneath everything else. No, he says, don't do that. Stop making provision for the flesh and for its cravings. I hope this made sense to you. I'm glad we got together online today. And I hope you realize that when I talk to you about this, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody else. The fingers all point to me. It's something that indicts me and indicts all of us. And we can put down the donkey. We can take off the old patterns of thinking and doing and living and put on new patterns. We can do it. The Spirit is here to help us. May you find His help and sense the smile of God's pleasure. May Adonai bless you all and keep you. May He cause His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He lift up His countenance